Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webcast on change management principles for customer success with Kate Forgione, the founder and CEO of Customer Success Network. I'm so excited today to welcome Kate on the other side of the camera as a presenter. Apart from being the driving force behind the community, Kate also has plenty of both academic and professional experience in organizational development and change. And she's worked with some of Microsoft's largest customers to embed Office 365. When customers purchase a product, they often trust us to introduce some improvement to the day-to-day lives or to their work. Often this requires them to change not only the way they do their work, but in some cases, even to modify the way they think about their jobs altogether. While excited by the prospect of positive change, human beings are not always as excited about the journey to get there. As customer success managers, we need to manage this transition, leading customers to improve outcomes while maintaining their trust in us and in our product all the way. The challenges here can be many, from understanding an organization's structure and functioning to finding the right pace of transition, and even sometimes transforming people's habits altogether. Here's where customer success can borrow some principles from change management. But what exactly is change management? How does it work? And most importantly, how do we adapt its mechanisms to achieve tangible results in customer success? This is exactly what I'm so excited to hear from Kate today. The webcast is hosted by the Customer Success Network, and I'm your host, Morika Georgieva. I'm a part of the Customer Success Network and the CS team at Beamery. The ones who have been with us for a while now would know that the aim of the session is to be as interactive as possible. Think about it as the way you think about a team meeting, for example. So please ask questions along the way. We're going to stop twice in the webinar, once in the middle and once towards the end, to give you a chance to ask those questions. You can use the chat box to post them in the meantime, or just ask questions once we make the pauses in the middle and towards the end. As usual, we are broadcasting the webinar live into our workplace community so that you can watch it later as well. And without any further ado, I'm gonna hand over to Kate. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Morika. Hello, everyone, and thank you for everyone joining from across Europe today. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and it's something that I spent my early years studying and focusing on was change management and changing and transforming organizations. So it was through that channel that I became a customer success manager. So I'm going to kind of put my spin on what I think how change management works for us in customer success. And hopefully some of the things that I'm going to say are going to reinforce what you already know, as opposed to like transform your thinking. So the interesting thing about change management, it is that it's a little bit like customer success in that it's not a really clearly defined profession. And groups of people similar to us have built communities and built training courses and accreditation and that kind of stuff to put some rigor around the field. So there's a lot of variability in what we do. So I'm just presenting my view of it and how I use it in customer success. There are many other ways you can do it, and other practitioners will give you a different view. Okay, so a little bit about change management history. So it started around the 1960s, but didn't really become part of ways of organizational working into the 1990s. And this came with the technology implementations of the 1990s. So my very first technology implementation was in 2004-05, and it was a document management system called Hummingbird. And it was an on-prem tool, and it was the first time that we had used electronic document storage in our organization. So before that, it was hard files. So I think I'm probably the first of the generation who's never worked on a hard filing system in an organization and only ever used electronic filing. So there are lots of frameworks that you can look at. So the main ones are Lewin, Cotter, Kubler-Ross, McKinsey, and of course AdCar, which I'm going to touch on today because I think it's really easy for CSMs to apply. And I've also given some of the first books that I've read in change management that helped me understand what it was like to be on the receiving end of change, as opposed to be that person who gave the change. What was it like to receive it? And how could you as a change practitioner understand those people better to help them engage them into change better? So when I hear a statistic like 70% of change management projects fail, if you think back to all your customer success engagements, would you say that 70% of your customer success engagements have failed? Probably not. It will probably be the other way around, and even 30% of failed projects sounds high. So I think we have really big opportunity in customer success to change the way that change management is done and decrease that number of apparent failed projects. So a little bit about change management and why we even need to do it. So if you think about how organizations work, traditional organizations, so some of our larger customers that we go into, the whole of the 20th century, we focused on building efficient organizations. So it was about production lines and Henry Ford and doing things this repeatedly and faster. So the same actions got carried out over and over again. We grew organizations to become predictable. Everything in organizations was linear. Think of the organizational chart and how many straight lines are on that. And we aimed to control everything we did in organizations because we believed if we could control everything in organizations, we could find efficiency and economies of scale. However, this is fine if everything stays the same, but as the increase of change happens in the external environment, organizations prove themselves to be less adaptable to change. So that leaves us today when the environment is definitely not stable. So in the 21st century, we have access to multitudes of technology, both in our consumer life and in our work life. It allows us to become more globally interconnected, and we're personally enabled. So we can make decisions, do things, create things at any time in our own. So just like the example of the Customer Success Network got created in less than a year in free time. We could never have done that 30 years ago. So we start to see a tension between the chaos of the external environment and the structure of our organizations. And that's what we find when we come in as customer success managers and we want to embed our service as fast as possible. We find ourselves stuck between this tension in organizations. And please feel free to stop me if anyone's got any questions. So if you look at how organizations work, they're super noisy and super complicated. So if you start to think about, here's your customer, and these are all the things that impact how your customer works today. So the organizational structure, are they flat or are they hierarchical? Organizational design, are they a hybrid type organization? Are they global? Do they have frontline workers? Who's enabled with technology? Who's not? Processes, are they tight or are they loose? When you talk to people in the organization, do they say they can't do things because of rules and process? Or people allowed to make decisions around enabling a best outcome rather than a process? Is the leadership got to focus on command and control, or does it believe in enabling people that people come to work to do their best? And it gives people the space and autonomy to achieve what they need to do to be great in their job. How is information disseminated? Is it top down, or is there listening that comes up as well? Is the focus on people or is it on task? So really an example of this, I was sitting in a restaurant the other day and I saw a waitress and I needed some service in the waitress, and I could see that the waitress was focused on task. She reorganized the salt shakers. She put the paper in the till. She dusted off the bench. She organized some napkins. And in the end, I got quite upset because I was like, this is a person in potentially an organization that is focused purely on task and is unaware of the people around them. So a people-focused organization will have lots of training, coaching, ways to enable its people to become successful and to learn. So as a CSM, you may go in with a young new service and you need to embed a training program, and they will have the mechanisms to do that. If it's not got a people focus, you're less likely to find a learning department or the resources that help people learn. And the market strength is your customer in a market that is gung-ho and going super great at the moment, or is it one that's in really, really tight competition? So an example would be in market strength, many tech companies are in a period of fast growth and have incredible market strength at the moment. And then we look at retailers who are being threatened by the likes of Amazon. So the high street tech retailers who have a lot of estate space are being threatened. And so they're in a weaker and weakening market. So they are looking to enhance their competitive strength through potential technology implementations. Ownership. Is the company owned by family? Is it owned by conglomerate? Is it owned by shareholders? Because that really makes a difference in how people make decisions. Mergers and acquisitions. Are they being merged with another company or acquiring? And how tight is their regulatory landscape? Because that will limit the speed with some of the implementations that we can do. So that sounds complicated, but then we add this, and that's what individuals bring to the story. So as a CSM, not only are you dealing with a customer on the macro scale, you're also dealing with a bunch of micro behaviors around people, how people do their job every day. So I'm not going to go through this, each of the individual behaviors, because I'm going to leave them here and we'll put the slide deck up for you afterwards in the community. But if you think of the combinations and permutations of all these activities that happen in an organization daily, it's no wonder that change can be super difficult. So today we're going to look at a way to make it simple for you, hopefully. So take away all this noise and let's look at organizations in a really simple three-step way. So first up, think of everything you do as a CSM at an organizational level. What are you trying to achieve at the organizational level? Secondly, what are you trying to achieve at the team level? So this is where you might think about use cases for team by team and value realization for different functions. And at individual level, what does it mean for the individual to be part of this program where they're going to have to change the way they work? So if you break everything you do down as a CSM into those three stages, it all becomes a lot easier and you know who you're focusing on. So change management is very much about putting yourself into the shoes of the customer. And I think to be a really good CSM, I think this is actually the first thing that you need to be able to do. So I know from leading teams of CSMs, I've had CSMs come to me and say, oh, like I'm really, really annoyed with this customer because they're not responding to my email. And then when they did, they had to cancel the meeting. And actually, if you think about it, so why did that customer not reply to your email? Is it because they have many projects? Is it because they're sick? Is it because it's half term and they have 4 children and they're at home? And the reason they cancel the meeting is related to any of those. So quite often, once we have that amount of empathy, we can relate to the challenge the customer has. And sometimes, and let's say most of the time, that challenge has got nothing to do with what you want to work on with them. It's got something else to do that's going on in their life as an external stressor or like activity that's going on. And I think this is the quickest way to be successful as a customer success manager is to have empathy, but also to use that to build your relationship with the customer. So there has been a bit of a swing, certainly since I started in customer success, where it was all about relationship, to move into more process orientation and financial accountability. But at the heart of it, it's really still about empathy and working with the customer. So just to kind of clarify what we're talking about in change management before I go into the future slides. So this isn't the type of change management that you hear from IT, where they say we need to put in a change management request. That's to do with a Prince2 or an enTo process, or some IT process is a change request. Project management isn't change management. Project management is a process, and change management takes elements of project management process and uses it. Change management is a process focused on people. So that's where it's taking the elements of project management, but it applies it to people. And then finally, customer success is about scaling a process to engage people to use new technology at speed. So we take parts of project management and we take parts of change management to help our customers adopt and use at speed. So my introduction is supposed to cover the how, the what and the why of change management. I'm going to go into more detail in the second part, where we're going to talk about the how, but are there any questions or thoughts from the introduction?
Thank you so much for the introduction, Kate. That was so exciting. And while the people are kind of typing their questions away, something that I was thinking while you were speaking, and I was kind of scribbling away notes. I love the thought of empathy, and how when we're trying to implement a process about people, we need to think about empathy. But sometimes as CSMs, we're also taught to kind of push back and to kind of incentivize the behaviors that we want. And sometimes it's kind of difficult, I suppose, to find the balance. Do you have any advice on how you can balance being empathetic but still moving your point across to get there?
So if you think about empathy plus getting your point across, in cultural terms, it's an achievement orientation. So it's understanding the way the person or team or organization has to get their work done, but it's holding them to account on what they want to achieve. So I think it's always maybe sharing with the customer that we can continue down this track, and the consequence of continuing down this track looks like this, but we could make this small change or do it slightly different or think about it differently, and the result will become this. And let them choose which path they'd like to take. And from like a customer success point of view, that sounds kind of nice that we let them choose, but it's also important that we document why we've chosen it and share it back to them, because we know that when things don't go well, particularly, sometimes we need to create an escalation within our own team, or we need to reflect back to our customer why things aren't going well. So still using our notes to cover off why we've gone the way we've gone.
And kind of from your experience, do you find there's particular types of customers, or perhaps at particular levels of organizations, that will be more susceptible to change into working with you so far, like this? Or
I'm going to go through that in the next section. I'm going to help you understand, or at least be able to more quickly define how you can tell which customers you'll be able to work with and achieve a lot with faster. It took me a long time to learn this as a customer success manager. So probably like many of us, I got thrown into the deep end and had to learn to do the job. And it wasn't until I started to not get the result that was desirable in some customers that I started to be able to differentiate between those that moved fast and those that didn't move at all. And they can be tricky to tell, because sometimes your contact, the customer, is super, super nice, and they seem to be really well connected across the organization, and they always say the right thing. But when it comes to looking at their usage numbers or whatever metric you use to track success, you can see that the result isn't corresponding to what they say they're going to achieve. So it's a hard one. Yeah. So I'll take you through some steps that I've put together. And this isn't a methodology. This is just me spending like 2 weeks thinking about how I used to work with customers or how I like to work with customers and what I've learned over the years, and bringing that together with some change management techniques.
Amazing. Looking forward to it.
Okay, is there any questions or comments? I'm going to ask a quick question first, actually, of you guys in the who are listening in today. So everyone who's on their computer, could you just type in one word that you describe change? When you think of change management, what's one word that comes to mind for you?
The first one's trust. Digital communication, listening, resistance, communication again, transparency. Everybody wants, but nobody wants to lead it.
Yes, someone put a picture like that on LinkedIn, I think, this week.
Impact, pushback, achievement. Very interesting one. Success.
Thank you, Carlo. Yeah, Oscar, ROI. Okay, journey. Kind of like popcorn in the microwave. The pops are stopping. So they're really great, and we're gonna capture those and include them into a little word cloud for later on to so we capture what today change management means for us in customer success. So I'm going to go into this next part, and please do type questions into the chat box for Marika, and she will stop me to cover off any questions you guys have during the presentation. I've got no problem with being stopped at all. So here we go. And likewise, feedback or thoughts, challenge what I'm saying, because this stuff it's contentious. It's not like accountancy. There's not a strict methodology to it. We're working with a science that's as imperfect as ours around change management. So I was contemplating the order of these slides. They might seem out or they might seem right to you. I couldn't decide which order they go, but I'm going to start with discovering your joint purpose. So we'd say for many of us in customer success that this is something that would happen in the handover point with sales or your account management or another person in your team. So when I'm talking about this, it doesn't need to come from the customer necessarily, but you need to know this information. And also, if your customers maybe said it previously, but someone in your organization hasn't recorded it or doesn't remember, or for whatever reason that knowledge has left the organization, you can still get this back with really kind of sensitive questioning lines. So when you work in large account teams, this happens quite a lot, where many people ask many questions of the same people, and they'll end up saying to you, well, I already answered that question. Why should I tell you? So in customer success, we really need that question answered, right? So let's think about a smarter way to ask the same question to get the answer we need, even if someone's already asked the question. So discovering the joint purpose is going back. If you think of Simon Sinek and his Why TED video that's super popular amongst the customer success crowd, and you go back and you start with the think of why. So why has your customer bought your service, or I'm calling it product for the purpose of this webcast. So get to the heart of why. And these are some of the questions that you might want to ask or tailor to fit your service in your company. So understand, how are they using, what has your customer got, the people in your customer's company using today to get the job done? And why are they not working? And is there a reason that now is the time for your customer to start changing the way they work or buying this tool? What's the pressure that's creating the purchase today or the need to change today? How will this new way support what the organization wants to achieve? it's a really important question, particularly if, so you'll see it in 2 stages, and I'm going to go into this in the next slide, but has the service been bought by team or been bought by organizational level? That makes a huge difference to what you'll be doing next. And how we're working in a new way change the organization. Is it going to be something that the entire organization needs to shift their mindset, or is it a small tweak? And I'm going to cover that next too. And what does success look like, most importantly? So I'm going to go into each step of the why, the how, and the what in this presentation. But it's super important that you and your customer are on the same page with the why. And then the why is used throughout the communications that happens for then on with your customer. So if the why is never achieved, how would your customer be able to tell all the people in their organization what the purpose is of what they're doing? So if you go back to principles of organizational justice, which is organizational justice is a fancy word for saying fairness in organizations. There's a lot of research that says if you can explain to a person why this is happening, they'll be more accepting of the change, regardless of the fact whether they agree with it or not. So that's a really important thing to keep in the back of our minds as customer success managers, because we do create change and we need to do things that not everyone agrees with every day. And that why is the secret to unlocking that purpose that people will buy into. So you'll find many of your customers don't have that why. Spend the time and get that why before you move any further. And it can take a lot of time, but it's absolutely worth it. So I've talked a little bit about knowing where your customer is before you start enacting any change with them. So I'm going to give you like a super quick and dirty way to predict change readiness. So change readiness is basically what it says on the tin. It is the customer's, I guess, has the customer got their environment and their people are ready to do what they say they're going to do. So let's start by looking at it on a scale of like what the change looks like. So is the type of change that the organization is wanting to commit to, and these are my terms, infrastructure change, which is essentially a like-for-like change. When you say like-for-like change, so this was an example for me when I worked with Office 365. We were replacing a lot of on-prem email systems with Office 365. Essentially, we were replacing a like-for-like, email for email. Email is email, right? You could put any email in on top of another email and people can still use email. So it was really limited change and really limited need to learn the new product. So from a customer success perspective, once I knew that a customer was doing an infrastructure change, I would limit the assigned resource to really small amounts because it was almost a negligible value creation by assigning a CSM to that customer, no matter how big that customer was. And then if you look at the transformational change, this is where the customer basically says, my business will not survive if I keep doing things like I do today. We are buying this product to change our organization, and we expect you to work with us and tip our entire organization upside down and create new ways of working, a new mindset, new collaboration, new tools, ways of connecting with our partners and with our customers. We expect this to touch every part of our organization. And so this is where, so you'll be somewhere on this spectrum, and it's super rare probably to be on that full transformational end, unless you work for like a big company like SAP or Microsoft. You'll be doing somewhere in between those two. And then this axis is around visibility of change. And so with visibility, I almost put leadership here, but I think visibility of change is far more relevant because it touches all parts of the organization, and leadership sits as part of it. So when there's a high visibility of change, the purchase of your service is tied to organizational goals. So going back to that purpose and the why, they know why they've bought it. There's a sponsor or an exec leader who's highly engaged in the success of this, and they want to achieve it because not only have they probably got a KPI on their dashboard and they're accountable to shareholders or the board or another entity or in the organization, they are going to visibly commit it and lead it and role model it inside the organization. The other thing that around visibility change is urgency or burning platform. I was working with a retailer, and they had posted their fourth quarter of poor results, which is a little while ago. So now it's quarter on quarter on quarter for poor retailers. But they were really holding back on putting in the technology, and we end up having a conversation about their financial results and understanding the urgency of change. And it was like, well, if your competitors are doing this or done this, they are already ahead of you. So how important is for you to retain your market share and change so that you can start adapting to this new high velocity, market driven, like much more competitive retail environment. And so a conversation that we had around actually like we need the organizations to change faster than us, put that burning platform down, and we were able to start pushing forwards. Intra-team is a really big one for visibility of change. So is it requiring teams to cross collaborate or multiple teams across the organization to work together or to adopt this? And the last one is it's well resourced. So have you got a project lead? Have you got a product owner? Have you got an entire project team? Is that team got the resources to access the organization? So all those things I've bucketed into a topic headline item called high visibility for change. When you go to low visibility of change, it's the opposite of all that. But how could you tell? Some of the markers might be that the purchase was rapid. So it got bought off a credit card and really instantly, and it was bought by just one owner sitting somewhere in the organization, which is it's a siloed organization. So it was bought by the HR team or it was bought by the finance team, and that's fine if the tool just sits there, but if it doesn't, so which will move you along the axis of the transformational change. But if it's required by more people than who purchased it, then these things are a problem. And a copy purchase is they bought it because their competitors bought it. So they're kind of the signals that maybe they've not bought with the right intent to use. So I actually wanted to put like the J curve of the CSN over the top of this because it actually kind of like makes sense. But so here we go. When you can mark yourself, your customer, into each of these quadrants, and there's the likelihood of success. So if there's infrastructure and high visibility of change, there's high likelihood of success because it's a like-for-like, we know it, and the leadership are behind it. If it's a like-for-like change with no leadership, there'll be limited success. People know how to use what they already need to use. But as all new services today, there's always more. Like tech doesn't stand still. The features are always evolving and always great. So in the case of Office 365, did they just use email or did they add in Delve and SharePoint as well? So there's so many things in Office 365 they could use that are beyond email. So from a vendor perspective, they've only got limited success. When there's no visibility of change and it's transformational, no visibility of the change and it's a transformational change, it's absolutely no chance of success. When we were looking at which customers to work with and invest our limited customer success time into, if customers met this criteria, we simply wouldn't work with them. And that's not to say that it's not a customer we would work with in the future, and it's not a customer that we stay in touch with. It's just we communicate with them differently, and it's more like, you need to do these things before we will work with you. And if you go back to the high visibility of change, so when we say you need to do these things, now we need to see how this is tied to your organizational goals. Who's going to sponsor it? How's this going to be visible in the exec? What's the urgency for this, and what's the reason you're doing it? Is there an intent behind it? Which teams is it going to affect, and when? And how have you resourced the project team to make this happen? So for those customers that are in that no success quadrant, they're just not ready now because they own your product. It doesn't mean they'll never be successful, but your job as a CSM pivots from adoption to helping, well, I guess don't help them, guide them, because we know that it's a black box of time if you go into it. But it's starting to get them to set up that high visibility of change criteria. If you're really lucky, your sales team does this every time before you enter as a customer success manager. And that's the ideal world, but we know that it's not always the way. So don't waste your time trying to get this stuff put in place. Be very clear about the success criteria to your customer and get them to do it at their end, and set up a cadence meeting to check how they're going. So every month, how are you going? What have you got? Who do you need to speak to? And just keep getting it moving forward like that. Okay. All right, so this is the framework that I've put together for customer success, and it definitely could do with more building out because it is put together for today's presentation purposes. But the idea is that it's a simple way to start thinking about the elements that we do differently in customer success than a project manager would or a change manager would. So I actually, when I was looking for someone to do this presentation, I posted into the change management practitioners group, which is 60,000 odd deep in LinkedIn. And I asked, does anyone do change management for customer success or know anything about it or got a view? And I really struggled to get anything, let alone people knowing what customer success was. So once we'd established it was not support, we didn't get much further than that. So we really are learning as we go for this. So I'm looking, this is how I built it. So I think there's 3 elements to how we do change management in customer success. And the key element, if you go back to the definition, is that it's a process to engage customers to adopt new technology at speed. And so that's the key defining factor from our cousins in change management who tend to do long-term implementation projects. So if you look at a ProSci methodology or use a Kotter methodology, you're going to be working at an organization for probably a minimum of 6 months, and if not longer, like years. So as CSMs, we do not want that scenario. We are not resourced for that scenario, and we will probably lose our jobs if we find ourselves in that scenario. So this is intended to be quick and dirty, and something that you can build on, as I say, build on with your marketing teams and sales teams. And it's definitely not like you will probably have all of this. It's just how we think about it that changes. Most of us are at a level of maturity that we have assets and support and all that kind of stuff set up for a customer to access. It's how we're thinking about it that may be changing. So if we go back to the initial 3 circles diagram with the why, the what, and the how. So the why becomes the customer. The what, I would say the why, the how is the product. How we're going to do it is our product. And the people are the what. So the people are the ones that are going to make this happen for us. So the first one's the customer. So now if you look at this, it looks kind of like a project plan, right? This is the steps that you would have if you did some basic project management with a customer. So think about it in 3 phases. So the goal and vision, going back to the purpose and the why. I'm going to keep saying it because it is literally the most important thing. If you're not all on the same page, it's not going to go so well. So spending time to have that organizational goals and the purpose statement or a vision statement for why the customer is going to adopt your service. So back when I worked with Yammer, it used to be things like we want to create an organization that's open and transparent, because they weren't. Like, we were shifting from siloed emails where you only emailed people you knew to people who could talk to anyone at any time and find information on anything at any time. So those type of purpose statements that you can repurpose or reuse in your communications, in your training, in your exec, like town hall kind of like cascades. The same language keeps coming up and again and again. And that really, language is so important in change, because it makes people, just like by us all talking English, we all understand each other. In a change project, until you have everyone talking the same language, they don't understand each other. So remembering not to use acronyms or like shortcuts to explain things. And particularly us guys in tech, we have to be super, super careful not to talk in acronyms, because it's not a common language. Using the full word. So customer success isn't CS, it's customer success. And using those things to just keep the language constant. Planning, there's some things that really make a big difference in success. It's the timeframes and milestones. If it sounds silly, but and sounds super obvious, I guess is probably a better way to say it. But if you don't have those milestones, they never seem to happen. So you think about when you say, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to start going to the gym. You're telling your friends, you're down Friday night, having a drink with your friends, you're going to go to the pub, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to the gym. And they're like, yeah, whatever, okay, whatever. But if you say, I'm going to go to the gym at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, you genuinely do. So it's just the same as customers. Have a time and have a date, and then do everything as a T minus when you build back, like you would in a project, to make it happen in that date. Success measures, know what you're working for. This is important in that you will have to communicate with the exec, and if they don't know what success looks like before they start, they're less likely to back you and be that visible leader that you need to help this happen. Governance is super important in that, making sure you have the right project team in place, you have the right connections for escalations, and which I've put in stakeholders too, and that you have the right mechanisms to make things happen. So I was on a customer where the technical onboarding team had absolutely nothing to do with the adoption and change team, and they were in different parts of the organization, and never the twain should cross. And one of the things that we did from a customer success perspective was, before we even started to push the product, was to look at the governance of how these teams would work together and how they communicated, because we noticed things like the adoption team was wanting to do a release of a service, and the technical team hadn't done the technical side, and vice versa. So the technical side was done, and they were like, why is the organization not using this? Because we finished it. What's this team doing? And then they started to get antagonistic between each other. So we actually went back into the higher levels of both our organizations and raised escalations on both sides and pulled the entire project over and started again. So that was a 2-year project that had gone nowhere before we started to look at the governance structure. And by looking at that governance structure and starting again, yes, it was probably a bit more expensive at the time. And yes, it meant we had to start again, but it also meant we went back to that velocity effort of change management and onboarding. And we ended up shifting that customer faster in the following 6 months than we had done in the previous 2 years. So all those things about how people communicate with each other in organizations. It's change management, and it's important. Risk management, knowing, so this would have been a risk, flagging risks really early and making sure you're logging them. And then reviews, having the right stakeholders to review with regularly. So I've touched on most of the stakeholders already. So your sponsors, your project lead, your product lead, the business leaders, and having a route for escalations. Stakeholders seem to be at the heart of what we do quite often. I've just seen Jamie has put a comment up, so I'm going to pick that up if that's okay. So Jamie has said, I think that regional culture for people will be a challenge for change managers. I noticed that the cultural norms can be interpreted differently. In Germany, for example, positive and negative feedback to change is very direct through strict hierarchies, while in Asian countries, the positive side of any feedback is always emphasized through consensus. Oh, Jamie, that's a really great point. So this is someone who's worked in both these countries. And I think, yes, that's very, very true. And it is something we have to be super sensitive with, is how we do this change. So one of the things in Germany is that we've found that customers prefer to be given the process to do things and the tools, and they just get on with it. Whereas here in the UK, customers prefer to have more interaction and more hand-holding and more checking along the way. So yeah, this stuff does work differently into different cultures along the way. But I think the like core things that need to be done are the same. It's how we do them that might change a little bit. That's a really great point. Thanks, Jamie. I've got that in the way of my... Okay. So product. So this is knowing from your product side what success looks like. So what do you need from the customers to be successful? So I didn't want to use like the same words over and over again, but it kind of is like, do you need a sponsor? Do you need a product owner? Do you need an entire finance team? What do you need from your side, from the customer, to be successful? And articulate it, test it and articulate it. So you can test this by going through your customers, or just asking your CSM, say, who are your top 10 most successful customers? And having a checklist. Do they have a C-level sponsor? Do they have a non-C-level sponsor? Do they have exec presence? And just go through a checklist, and maybe those three things are the same, too similar to each other, but go through a checklist and they can just mark, these successful customers have these characteristics, and you will see trends. Likewise, pick your 10 least successful customers, and do they have any of these things? And you will start to see. And so in terms of success, you can then go, and there's the gut intuition of the CSM saying these are most successful. Then you can test that against your core health metrics, whether it's usage or what other things you use to see how the customer's progressing. So you can actually test whether your gut feel around which elements of change are working. So you focus on them and don't focus on the things that aren't going to help. So that's when you start to learn this, you can build a methodology to support this. And the methodology is not just for customer success. You can give it to the sales team and say, we've learned that these things create success faster. If you can get these done in the pre-sales environment, it's going to speed up the onboarding and adoption and embedding phases for us in customer success. And that is like a total win-win across the company if you can get that. And then you need, in addition to that, to make sure the customer's supported. So having your help, like having the right resources accessible on your website or in a OneDrive or however you communicate with your customer, having that all available for them in a structured and easy to find way. Customers prefer to find these resources themselves. They don't like opening millions of links in emails. So one of my favorite companies of how they've done these supporting materials, I really like Airtable. I think they've done a great job in terms of using the pop-up interaction, and also find the community and finding resources is super simple. Typeform is another one that does it really, really well. So goal alignment. does your, super simplistically, does your product do what the customer needs it to do? And we all know the answer is not always yes, because we don't sell the product, we just deal with what happens after it's sold. And if the answer is no for you, this is a really important time to escalate that conversation inside your own organization, because not only if you think it's okay to say no and then start working as a customer success manager, you are more likely to fail, and it's more likely that customer success will be seen as the reason of that failure. But if you say, look, like, we don't have a goal alignment, and you escalate it inside your organization, two things can happen. One, you go forward and you deal with the consequence, or two, you can get senior level stakeholders inside your organization to get together and work on a way forward. And I think when I say senior level, it's important because we go back to having that sponsor and C-level buy-in, and that peer-to-peer kind of engagement and resale can really help make that happen faster. And again, back to the time frames to achieve the goals. I'm just gonna have a quick drink of water, excuse me. Relationship, this is where we started. The whole customer success thing started like having great relationships before we measured absolutely everything. So you do need to have relationships with your change stakeholders inside your customer, as many and as varied as possible, and ensure that across your organization that internally you're all really well connected. So you don't want to have these like duplication of conversations, but like also you want to be able to have your customer access product and your product team learn from your customers. So those internal relationships are just as important. And also between your company and the customer. So the relationship shouldn't just be hinged on one or two people. The more that your customer feels that they're in a partnership, the stronger that tie becomes. So that's engaging on multiple levels, whether they attend your events, that they're in your community, that they go to like CXO type product owner dinners, that your CEOs get to know each other. There's a whole way that you can create multiple connections through your organization. So if today you're looking at your customers and you're thinking, oh, I'm really the only one who talks to them, that's not great. And that should be one of the things that you start trying to work on, is create multiple contacts between your customer. Finally, I'm going to leave you with the people, and this is AdCar. So there's tons of resources on the internet that are publicly available. So I haven't personally used AdCar. I use elements of it, but it is the most common customer success simple framework to use. I know there's some CSMs on the call today who use AdCar. So the first is awareness. And awareness is really like, does your end users, to use a harsh kind of like unpopular term at the moment, but do your end users know that they're supposed to be doing something different? And then if the answer's no, the answer is communication. So going through like building a communication plan, going through all like the channels and elements of communication and timings, and getting that put together. So if you need a communication plan, rip one off the internet. There's plenty around, or ask someone in the community for one, but your company should have a communication plan that's set for your product, that's available for the customer to use at any time. So it's one of those things the customer shouldn't be creating. We should be giving it to our customer, set out with what we know makes them successful faster. Desire is what's in it for me, or with them. I use an acronym, I'm sorry. So WIFM is the thing that motivates people to do something differently. So it's the promise that they can do more work faster. They can do more work more correctly. They can do less work and achieve more. It's a really good one. They'd be more productive. So they can do what they're doing for cheaper. So is it find out what the thing that matters to them. And for your stakeholder, if your stakeholder that is supposed to be helping you with this change is inertia, understand what matters to them. Like, why are they inertia with what you're doing? Is it because they're scared? Is it because they failed at this before? Is it because it's a low priority for them? Help them become super successful around what matters for them. So we talked about, we used to talk about, make your customer a hero. So that's the WIFM, and it touches everyone that you need to work with in a customer success space. Knowledge is training, abilities, the coaching, and making sure there's a wraparound for the leadership and team for people to learn and fail. And reinforcement is that it's embedded in everything that you need it embedded into, like your product to be sticky in the organization. So is it in the way the team works? Is it in organizational systems and processes like performance management? Is it in financial processes or procurement processes or whatever, wherever your enterprise tool sits? Is it in the system that it needs to be? And you see I've got a big line across the bottom. The thing that keeps all this moving forward is leadership. And without leadership, it's really, really, really hard to be successful. And this is like CSM needs to keep ensuring that leadership's engaged and visible, and making sure that people around the leader are helping them do what they need to do to help this be successful. So I know we're kind of out of time here, so I'm sorry. I didn't think I'd make it over the time. So what does success look like? If we put those three circles together, between product and customer, we have adopt. Between product and people, we have engage. And between customer and people, we have embed. They are the things that make our services stay in, our products stay in our customers, so that they renew and expand licenses. And so at the intersection is value realization. So there was some thinking behind all of that. And so just make sure when you're doing this, you always work to a framework. So the framework needs to be repeatable and scalable, understandable and has light effort, because the customer is going to see this as well. Resource supported, measurable, iterative, and it's probably called a customer success plan. Thank you very much for everyone's time today. I hope that was helpful. And if you've got any questions, please ask through the chat.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was amazing. And as always, I'm really glad that we saw some practical advice of what to kind of take on and go and implement on your desk if you want, even tomorrow. I know that we're over time. The ones of you who would like to stay on, we have one question, so I think we can just spend a little bit more time there. We just had we had a question about leadership. So would you mind just expanding a little bit around leadership and how you can have leadership be successful for a change management process?
Yeah, okay. So I think leadership was the arrow that I had all the way across. So by leadership, it's everyone who has the authority to be a leader in the organization. So when you're doing a company-wide implementation, you'll see that team by team, behavior is different. So in one team, you'll be really successful, and the other team, you'll have nothing going on at all. And usually the difference is the manager. So is the manager bought into what you're trying to do with the customer, what the customer's trying to do with your product? And if they're not, generally their team isn't either. But if those managers that do get engaged and excited about the change, their teams are usually the early adopters. So I think the more you can drive that leadership team through everything, it helps you do two things: stay positive, because there's a lot, it's really hard when you're doing a big implementation to see things going wrong. But those pockets of success are where you go and focus your energy and get the stories, replicate it, and share the success more, help share the success more broadly across the organization. So those leaders that are less willing to adopt early see that it's been tested and it's a great thing, and they do it as well. So sometimes people need the reassurance of others before they will act, and this leadership helps.
Amazing. I love that. Super inspirational wrap up there. You have a number of thanks from our listeners today. They're saying that your advice was super valuable and practical in real life. So thank you once again on behalf of the community, not only for the webinar and everything that you've told us today, but also for creating the Customer Success Network and for being the driving force behind not only this webinar, but all of our activities. So we're very, very lucky to have you. A final thanks to everyone who attended today. As usual, we broadcasted live on the workplace community where you'll be able to see the webinar in future. And we're also going to be distributing recording of that on the community as well. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.